So before we start into this next section around how we're explicit instruction, does anybody have anything they want to say, or let's just pause and give you time to think about it? You know, we say that, Stephanie brought that up in the chat just a minute ago. We say that for our students, we want to give them time to reflect and kind of chunk information. So since we all had a break and some time to think about what we've learned, let's just, if anybody has anything, comments, questions, things they want to say, I'll give everybody just a minute to reflect on that. Good, bad, and ugly, I guess, on that one. But if anybody wants to comment so far, how is that the learning going? Okay for? Is it okay for you guys to see the annotation and the things on the sharing the screen and that kind of things? Everybody seeing those okay? And okay, great. I see a thumbs up. I think I probably just, if you're the presenter, that when you use those tools, I see another thumbs up. So when you see those, I don't know if everybody sees them. I see somebody have clapping hands. I see another thumbs up. So I guess as if you're the one that's the host for the meetings, I see another thumbs up. So it looks like everybody's really got that one pretty well. So that's great. It just takes some practice with it.
Yeah, and Dion, I just want to say that's a really good activity when you come back together, kind of to do an attendance check to make sure all the children are back and, you know, they're kind of not flip-flopping, you know, out in the yard or something like that. So that's really good. So with those reactions, there's two. So there's the hand clapping and then the thumbs up. So that's pretty slick. And then everybody can see it. And I'm not sure how long, and I'm sure you can adjust it in the settings, but after a little bit, it times out. So it'll disappear once they give a thumbs up or whatever. So it'll go away. So that's just a good way to check and make sure, hey, is everybody with us? Or as Anita Archer says, has anybody taken a cognitive vacation? So at least you can kind of get a check and pull everybody back together. So that's a great activity.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl. That was a good point. Yeah, just making sure everybody's back together and giving them just a second to opportunity to ask questions. Okay. Let me check. So now I see that in the chat box, there's a couple things. Well, somewhere, but there was a couple things in the chat box that we mentioned just a little bit ago, and I wanted to come back to them. Is that well, I've lost them. When we thinking about ways for having kids respond, that we allow our students multiple opportunities for responding. So we also consider those different learning styles. But think about those kids who are visual learners, or who are auditory learners, or the kinesthetic learners. We have to try to think about different ways we have kids responding. And so it could be that we have them, you know, use some different things as we go through that. But it's important that we think about different learning styles and how we have kids respond. So as we plan and prepare and plan those lessons, those are things we certainly want to think about. We also want to think about embedding that wait time and some things that we do regularly in our classroom that we have to extend to that virtual experience as well. So we're going to start, and I'm going to just play you a little brief video. We're talking about explicit instruction. And so we hear about explicit instruction. We've heard that as, what is that, as SDI, or specially designed instruction. And we hear lots and lots and lots about explicit instruction. So we're going to take just a second and show you just a little clip. And now think about this. So think about this as if you're using this as your own lesson, and you have a little video clip you want your students to watch as you're delivering that virtual experience. So I'm going to click on this video here, and we're going to take just a look at Dr. Anita Archer's work and her explaining what explicit instruction is.
So I have the gift today of talking to you about explicit instruction. Explicit instruction simply is instruction that is quite direct. It is unambiguous, with the goal that the students would get it, would understand it, and would learn. We have a lot of confusion around the term explicit instruction, so let me sort of augment and add to that. One question I'm often asked is, wouldn't it be more motivating for students to learn it on their own, to discover it, to use authentic problems to discover it? And it's as if we have set up a total dichotomy between explicit instruction and discovery. But we really should view it as a continuum. And when we look at the research on instruction, we learn what are the attributes of that continuum. For example, if you are teaching children that are novices, that have just never learned this body of knowledge in the past, it appears that they do much better if we explicitly teach them the information, whether it's knowledge or skills or strategies, that we teach it. If they are learning a body of knowledge that they've not learned in the past, they're brand new to algebra, they are new to decoding of words, then they really benefit from very explicit instruction. So those two things, when the student is a novice, when the knowledge is new, explicit instruction would be desirable. But then after you've gained lots of information, you've gained lots of skills, then discovery is much more a viable option, but only after you've had explicit instruction. So one of the things that I also would be reminded of is the research. If you happen to be a special ed teacher, an interventionist, and you are working with struggling students, we definitely know that they are going to gain more with very explicit instruction than discovery. You know, if they had discovered it, they would not have been struggling. And so we need to have very explicit instruction for them. And what would that mean? Well, we could actually take explicit instruction and put it into two areas. One is the design of the instruction, and the other is the delivery of the instruction. And the design of the instruction means that we pick important content to teach them, we break it down into obtainable pieces, but then our lessons are organized so that more learning could occur. For example, I often talk about 3 major steps in teaching children skills and strategies, where I do demonstration, guided practice, checking for understanding. I do it, we do it, you do it. And many of the skills and strategies we teach would follow that pedagogy. But it also means that the students are not only directly taught it, but they have practice. Actually, I want to tell you, my concern is often that we're not giving adequate practice. I am constantly hear people say, well, you know, Anita, that is just drill and kill, drill and kill. And I can tell you, we have no reported incidents of children dying of practice. Instead, look at the research, the abundant research from cognitive science and from learning on practice. The students need deliberate practice where they're practicing with a purpose. They need practice that is spaced over time, not all in one session. And they need to retrieve information in that practice. So it's a combination of very explicit instruction with I do it, we do it, you do it, followed with deliberate and spaced practice and retrieval. But here's what I've noticed. I've had the great blessing of teaching for 52 years and do demonstrations all throughout every year. And what I have noticed is that students need better delivery skills than we've done in the past. For example, all instruction needs to be interactive. I say something, you say something, I write something, you write something. All explicit instruction would be very interactive, with students actively engaged throughout the entire lesson. And we would give them, we'd monitor and watch their responses, give them feedback on the responses, and we would maintain throughout the whole lesson a very perky pace. So those are some of the attributes of having very explicit instruction. And we know that then I set you up for your ability to solve authentic problems. I set you up for being successful. I set you up to generalize information to other situations. But this means we've got to keep the teach and teacher. And we have to provide the teaching that our students need. So let us never forget the research on explicit instruction, because if learning is our goal, then a lot of explicit instruction needs to occur there. Bless you in your career. May you thrive as an educator.
Okay. I think that was a great example of the work of Dr. Anita Archer, and she is just as she, I see hearts on here. She is just as she seems. We met her in person. We had the opportunity to train with her for several days, and she's just as dynamic in person and on that video. So I don't even know if the video captures the character of this lady, but so she came up with this model and this practice, and we're thinking about this, 1970s was the first publication she had around explicit instruction. And so we're going to just talk through that just a little bit for this section of the training. And so she talks about the I do it part. So as teachers, that's the part that we are really spending our planning time on and organizing and we're preparing for. But we plan for how we're going to have scaffolded learning, and especially for our students with disabilities. We don't just throw it all out there. We have to think about, how do I break that down? When I was talking about how we break down that writing piece, what components of that do I have to teach my students before they can ever put that whole piece of writing together? But as that, we model those activities. So we're going to demonstrate what that looks like. So that's the I do it part. The kids get to see that. So you model that, you model out loud your thinking, like you might say, I think this could be correct because I have this information and this piece of information. So you model that metacognitive processes, but you also give them many, many opportunities to respond. And you can have them respond as a group. You can have them respond individually. We can have them respond in different ways, like we're talking about through that virtual means. But we also need to check for understanding. And I know Vonda and Stephanie are going to talk a little bit about that as they go through their session, because we might think that kids know something, but when we look at their responses and how they're responding, and they're doing that often, we can immediately see if there is a misconception. And then right then we can reteach. So in our tool belt, we need to think about, so when we're planning our lessons, we need to think about multiple ways that we can model and show how a concept or a skill needs to be taught. The next section then is the we do it part. And this part is that we do this together. We go through the practice activities together. Here we want to have multiple examples of what example or non-example, and that we have kids be able to discern. So we know, based on that work with Robert Marzano and the research that he did with that meta-analysis of those effective practices, identifying similarities and differences get us the greatest gain in student achievement. What that means is that kids know what it is and what it is not. So one of the strategies that we can use for that is those examples versus non-examples. So as we're preparing our lessons, we have those tools ready for that lesson. We're going to say, this is what this might look like. This is what it doesn't look like. And during that, we're going to check for understanding. We're going to monitor and provide feedback. And then we can reteach it right there as necessary. And especially as special educators, we have this plan, I do it, we do it, you do it. That's the whole model. That's the independent practice, the you do it part. But as special ed teachers, we know that we do it, and we might show them multiple examples. They don't get it. We got to go back, and I've got to model again. And I may have to do 2 or 3 more models of an example before then I go back and relinquish back part of that responsibility to the student for the we do it part. And then I may get to that I do it, the we do it part, and then you get to the you do it part, and you say, oh yeah, they don't have it again. I'm going to have to go back and reteach it. I'm going to have to give them multiple practices. So on the screen here, we're talking about that annotation. So we've used that annotation. We've talked about how we might use a whiteboard. Vonda and Stephanie are going to talk about how we use email. Cheryl is going to lead us through an activity, how do we use a poll. And then we've used reactions. That's our thumbs up. That's the clapping, the applause that we've used today. So I'm going to first I'm going to ask Cheryl if she will take us through modeling how to do a poll. So we want you guys to be able to see that and think about that, because we're thinking about, as we do these lessons, we've got to get kids engaged. You know how hard it is for us to set for any extended period of time, that we have got to have kids engaged in that lesson, that we provide a little bit of instruction and then we let them do something. We provide a little bit more of instruction, we let them do something, whatever that mechanism is that we want to use with them. But I'm going to give Cheryl, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Cheryl is going to lead us through an activity around doing a poll through, just one second, I'm trying to find her.
All right, guys, as Dion is adjusting and we're kind of flipping screens, another thing, so most of you all probably know me and have met me, and most of my time is spent with assistive technology, and a lot of my time is spent with students in the FMD classroom. So, you know, a lot of our kids won't have access, and we know that. That's something that, you know, we just have to accept, I guess. But some of our kids will have some access, and those kids won't be able to sit for long periods of times. They're probably not even going to be able, in some cases, to use these engagement tools. But you know, there are a few things that we can do for engagement, and we're going to get to the polls in just a second, I promise. But there are a few things that we can do for engagement. And so one thing I love to do is have students stand up and stretch, and I'm not going to do that and embarrass myself today. But so just think about when you're with those students, have them stand up and stretch. Have them stand up and try to do a jumping jack, or, you know, something like that on camera. And, you know, that's going to add to that engagement. And it's also going to get some of that movement in, which is then going to increase their attention span. So I'll let you know that. Another thing that I'll say about the polls before I get started, if students maybe can't do the polls, we know that our students who are low incidence students may need a little bit of support on the other end of that camera. So when we think about using polls with our students, who have disabilities, let's go ahead and remember that they will probably need support on the other end of the camera. So maybe they can't select the A, B, C, or D answer, but maybe they can point to it and have someone on that end of the camera do the selection and do that use of the mouse with them. Also, let's think about those students who may have a touch screen. So that could be an opportunity as well for students to do that. So if students can't access that for some other reason or some reason, let's think about ways on the other end of that camera that we can keep them engaged and also give them an opportunity to make a selection. And usually that's going to be with another person. All right, so we have not tested this out and you have made me the host, Dion, but for some reason it does not give me that poll option. So I actually may, unfortunately, let me just double check this. Yeah, it's not giving me the option to do polls on my end, but hey, that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I've made a PowerPoint for us to go through this. So everybody should be able to see my screen now, folks. Can you see my screen? Should be a coral option there. So give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen.
No, I'm not seeing. Yes, okay. It's now starting to share.
Okay, maybe there's just a little bit of a delay there. So that's okay. And I'm going to double check something and make sure. Sometimes I'll tell you this up front. Sometimes within our settings, so for example, this is within Dion's within her computer and within her account. So I'll share something that happened on, I believe it was Friday. We had a training and it was through my account, and my intent was to start with breakout rooms, and I was going to set them in breakout rooms. Well, surprise, for whatever reason that function was deleted from my account, and the reason that happened is because I had made someone else a co-host. So make sure that your features are there, and sometimes they may not be there, just as today it's wiped my polling function out, and that's probably something on Dion's end, but if I need to, I'll run over there and we'll work on her computer. But either way, so this is about using your polls. So you should be able to see my screen. I'm going to go ahead and try to do this in present mode. I think it's going to let me. Couple things I'll say. I'm going to turn my closed captioning on. I'm using Google Slides, so there is an option that says CC that you can turn that closed captioning on. I will say immediately up front that sometimes it will say curse words. So just go with the flow. I'm not going to probably do any cussing right at the moment. So anyway, so how to create engagement. So of course we know first thing we have to do is start that Zoom meeting, and that's what we're using today, folks, is Zoom. So I won't go through how to schedule a meeting, but if you need to know, just let me know and I'll sit down with you and you know, figure that out and work together on that, or I can show you here at the office, however you'd like. So you'll see when you schedule that meeting, there is a polling option, okay? So you can go ahead and create these polls prior to your training. So after you go ahead, and let me go back to the previous screen. So once you're here on the Google screen and you've saved your meeting, you've told the name of the meeting, you've told the time of that meeting, hit save, okay? And so you're gonna see this screen come up. And this is the screen that will have your link, and I'll show you the link. It'll have the link up there. Let me turn my annotation tools on. So you'll see the link here, okay? And then down here, you'll see an option of poll, okay? So you're gonna select that poll to do that. So let me clear my annotation. Well, okay, so then what will come up when you hit poll, it's going to bring this little box up for us, okay? So we're going to enter a title for this poll. So I think the day that I was doing this, I was working on some alternate assessment stuff. So there may be some questions here in a minute about alternate assessment. So you're going to enter the title of the poll, okay? So it might let you have 3 or 4 or 5 questions, whatever you want, whatever your kids can handle. So for this case, I think, like I said, I called it alternate assessment. So there in step 2, you'll see the green arrow and the little man holding the 2. That's where you're going to ask your question. You're going to put your question in there. Now, I'm going to encourage you, specifically when your kids begin on this gig, not to put questions that are very difficult for the students, or maybe even questions that have a right or a wrong answer, because your students may not want to have you and everybody else see that initially. So you'll see down there under the question, there's a single choice or a multiple choice, okay? So if there's only one question, so say my question was, what's your favorite color? Well, probably, you know, I might do red, green, blue, and yellow, and I want them to have a single choice. So step 3, you put your answers in. Step 4, that's if you're going to do 2 or 3 questions within that same poll, okay? So you'll go ahead and start your Zoom meeting just like you normally would, and like I said, if you need help with that, let me know. I'll definitely lead you through that. I can link in on your computer and tell you step by step how to do it. So this is the option that I don't have on my screen, because this is Dion's meeting through her account, okay? So it'll say polling. Down there, it's typically toward the bottom, but I think Vonda had mentioned earlier that if you're using an iPad or something like that, or even a PC, it may look a little bit different, but typically on mine, that bar is at the bottom, okay? So it'll say polling. All right, so then what you'll do is you'll start your polling, and this is what it's going to look like. And so, as I said, I had been planning some alternate assessment stuff the day that I planned this, so I kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone. So these are just yes or no answers, and that was my option. And you'll see that there at the bottom, let me annotate that so we can share that together, and everybody knows where I'm at. So here are the questions. And so as the teacher, this is my screen. So here's something I can do. I can share the results. Now, if it's when I'm getting kids just kind of warmed up on this, I'm probably going to have a fun question. What's your favorite animal? What's your favorite color? Something like that. And I may want to share my results. Now, when you first start this, kids might not know kind of how to do it. You may even have an option of relaunching poll 1. Okay. So that'll give you that option. It tells you the percentage of students that answered this or that. So if I had a question that had a definite answer, who's the president of the United States or something like that, and some of the kids got it wrong, I may say, hey guys, let's look at this. Check your answer. You know, some of the kids answered Trump is the president. Somebody else, said that Elvis was the president or something like that. So that might give an opportunity for students to reflect on their answer and think about, hey, did I get the right answer or the wrong answer? So let me clear my annotation. And so in order to move in Google Slides from slide to slide, I have to turn my annotation off every time. And it may be something in my settings, but if it is, I haven't found it yet. So I have to turn that off, and then it lets me move back. Whoops. So this is when you're sharing it with attendees, and you can see I didn't have any attendees when I was doing this. And so it'll give me an option to end that poll as well. Okay. And I know I'm going fast, but I'm going to share this PowerPoint with you so you'll have step-by-step instructions. Okay. So this is the option for you to end the poll and no more kids can answer. Okay. Again, you can share the results. And so that's pretty much the end of it. It's very simplistic, and I want to go back up, not to try to make you sick or anything. But really, this step here, when you schedule those polls in advance, this is the crucial step, because you'll have that. And then when you start your meeting, it'll give you an opportunity to launch the poll. Okay. Any questions? That was pretty fast, but like I said, I'm going to give you this PowerPoint. You'll have step-by-step directions on that. Any questions about that? That was pretty quick, wasn't it? All right, and you're welcome to type your questions in the chat as well.
Absolutely. So we can just kind of pause there, and we're going to shift again back to sharing your screen.
Okay, let me stop mine. Okay, I think I stopped my share.
Okay, and so I'm going to reclaim host. And now I'm going to share a screen with Vonda, because now we're going to transition to another activity. So I wanted you to be able to see that there are multiple opportunities to share and move from different users. So this time, now I'm going to give Vonda an opportunity to be the host, and she is going to share with us an example of how she has used Zoom and some tools to create a virtual lesson. So she and Stephanie Kidd are our math consultants here at KVEC, and they are going to share with us a model lesson for using some multiple tools. So just be thinking about how these tools can be used. So if you all can see Vonda's screen, I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to Vonda and Stephanie.
Okay, so let me get this up here. We're going to model for you guys some lessons. As you know, when I work with math, my specialty is elementary, and Stephanie's specialty is middle and high. So I lost my train of thought now. So I will model a lesson in the elementary level, and then hopefully you will see the connection as how it will build into the lesson that Stephanie's going to model for you. And I want to use that explicit instruction model for you. And I need to turn my video on. Sorry about that. I realized my video was off. So in this lesson here, we're going to understand that I've already talked to the kids about equal groups, and we're working on the understanding of multiplication and what multiplication means. So now, after we've worked on making lots of groups and equal groups and that type of thing, now I want to get my kids to understand rows and how to make rows, and the relationship between multiplication and division. Because like when we teach addition and subtraction, we teach them together. We also are supposed to teach multiplication and division together. Whatever we do with one, we can undo with the other. So with that in mind, let's say that I'm going to do the I do part of this, which I'm just going to model what I want the kids to see. And of course, this can be done virtually, just like we're doing right here. I'm using a document camera, and this is just a sheet of paper, and I made the what I always called a bridge for my kids. And I've used little wiki sticks. They're just little craft. You can find them in the craft section, and it keeps everything from moving around here. Now, if you're in the classroom, you can give this to the kids, and you can put it inside of a sheet protector, and the kids can write on it with dry erase markers, and they don't have to repeat, multiple sheets of paper. But if they're at home, they can take just a sheet of paper, draw a large capital L on their paper, and they can use cereal, Fruit Loops or whatever for counters. They can use coins for counters, a bunch of pennies. They could use pinto beans, little uncooked beans, of course. Anything, just a small object to model what I'm going to do for you right now. But right now, all you do is you just watch, and I'm going to talk, and I'm going to talk my thinking, what I'm thinking about. So I want to think about making rows, and of course my rows need to be equal rows. So I'm going to make 3 rows of 5. So I'm thinking about 3 rows of 5, and we've talked about what 3 groups of 5 look like. Now we're going to look what 3 rows of 5 look like. So I'm going to start my 3 rows. So that'll be my first row. This will be the start of my second row, and this will be the start of my third row. And then I'm going to just fill that in. So I want to have 5 in each row. And then as I fill that in, I'm thinking, okay, I know how far I have to go here because I know I had 5 on that top row. So that fills up my second row. And all I have to do is fill in my third row. And now, if I want to figure out how many that is altogether, what could I do? Well, I could count each of them by ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And some of your kids will be at that level and they'll need to count 1 to 1. Some of them will see, okay, well, that's a row of 5, so I can count by 5s, 5, 10, 15. So it depends on where your kids are at. If they can add 5 and 5 is 10 and 5 more is 15. It depends on where they're at. Are they additive thinkers or have they become multiplicative thinkers where they can multiply? Okay, so that's what 3 rows of 5 looks like. I wonder what 5 rows of 3 would look like. So let's think about that. 5 rows of 3. I wonder what I could do. I've got 5 rows. Could I just turn it like this and build 5 rows of 3? It really puts into play what a turnaround is. Well, that's what we call the commutative property for our little ones, for addition and subtraction. But we can do the same thing with multiplication and division, talk about turnarounds. All I did was just turn it to make it become 5 rows of 3. Okay, so that's how I would model that for them. And like Dion said earlier, that I do it part, I may have to do it more than one time. That's where you have to look at your kids. That's where the virtual piece is difficult because you can't see your kids lots of times because they're not going to have that video on and you can't really understand, because I learn a lot by just body language. Are they engaged with me? Are they watching? Are they getting it? That type of thing. So you can ask the kids questions as you go as well. Okay, so let's do a we do it part. Okay, now with this we do it part, I'm going to give the scenario. And we'll do it together. So with this scenario, what I could do is I could talk about, okay, what if I have 2 rows of 4? Okay, so I'd like for someone to give me a thumbs up if you can tell me how many cubes I need to put down going down. So somebody in the, use your reactions. All right, Dion, can you tell me how many cubes I need to have going down?
I think, Miss Vonda, you need 2 cubes going down.
That's exactly right. Good, Dion. So we need 2 going down. Who can tell me how many cubes are going to be going across to form that row? So thumbs up if you think you can tell me that. Am I seeing? I'm not seeing everyone. All right.
Tracy.
I see Danny Paul here. Danny Paul, can you tell me how many is going to be going across? You gave me a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Okay. Vonda, Angela has a thumbs up.
All right, Angela.
Oh, I like it. Jessica's got 4. She's like showing it with her fingers.
Oh, perfect. So she's showing it. Perfect. All right. Good way. So see, I'm learning as well as you're learning because this is something new to me too. And someone's actually annotated for me. Perfect. And that was going to be my next step. We could actually do that. We could actually write on there.
That was me, Vonda.
Right. Oh, thank you, Danny Paul. Good job.
Put it in Doug's color.
Doug likes paint. That he does. All right. 2 rows of 4. And 2 rows of 4s would be what? It would be, and we could talk about that. Who knows what 2 rows of 4 would be? What does that equal? Who would like to annotate for us right down here in this space right here? Somebody got it. All right, you're right. That would be 8. Okay. So we see how that works for us, how we could annotate as well, just to do a little teacher talk over here to the side. I'm going to clear my screen off of everybody's. And now let's talk about, so we would do lots of we do it, where I would do this, we'd model, we'd talk about it, and they would be building at the same time. That's another point I need to make, is that they need to have those tools in their hands. I don't want them just to be watching me and giving me answers. I want them to actually be doing the building at this point as well. Okay, so let's take one, and and then of course the next point would be where I would have them do some on their own. But one more thing I want to show is I could actually have started with 8 here. Actually, let's just do another. I could have started with 9. Let's say I've got 9 cubes, and I want to put them in 3 rows. Okay. I know that my rows need to be equal because we've talked about equal groups. So we've talked about how to build those rows, how to get our starters. So who can tell me, actually, let's do it a different way. What I'd like for us to try to do is to someone go to your annotations. Let me flip this so it's a little straighter. Go to your annotations and choose the stamp, choose a stamp, and show me what that would look like with a stamp. If we had 9 and we put them into 3 rows, 3 equal rows, who'd like to try that for me? Okay, perfect, perfect. Yes, we're seeing that. So we're seeing 3 rows of 3. And of course, you see we've got lots there. So what we might want to do is just have everyone make sure that they're called on and make sure they have their turn. If somebody else wants to try, they can do their turn, that type of thing. That way we don't have a bunch all together. But that's perfect. See how we can have our kids do that? We can do that with our kids.
Vonda, that could go back to what Cheryl was talking about a little earlier. You could assign a color per student, absolutely, and then you could formatively assess very quickly whether they were able to model that or not.
Right, actually see who that is that's actually doing that, yes, because that is one feature that, and there may be a way to identify that other than doing that, but as of right now, that may be what we would have to do with that. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay, so next one, of course, next step would be, of course, for me to just give them one. Okay, so let's say that we have,
they could also hold up in front of their camera. Keep that in mind too.
Right, and like Stephanie said, they always could just show with their hands. They could show, or they could. Oh, and another thing that I've had my participants do. I had my participants do was during our summer academy, as I had them build this. So if we were going to do 6 rows of 3, 6 rows of 3, I would have them on their own. Now this is at the you do it part. So at the you do it part, I give them the assignment. They're building at home, in the class, wherever we happen to be. They're building, and after they build it, what I ask my participants to do is I ask them to take a picture of it. Now, our kids are great using those cell phones, those iPhones. They can take a picture and they could email it to me, or they could send it to me on my phone via a text. And then I could look at it, and I could do an assessment right then and there and see if they got it or not. So, but a lesson I learned after watching Stephanie do the same thing, then later on, a couple of weeks later, she had her participant do the same thing, and one of her participants hadn't quite got it right. Well, whenever I had mine pull it up, it was actually live, and I'd pull up the email and we'd look at it. Well, that could have been really embarrassing for a child if I'd been working with a child, or it could have been embarrassing for a teacher if I'd pulled something up and it was just, really way out there and it didn't quite have the understanding yet. So we don't want to embarrass our kids, just like we don't call them out in the classroom. We sure don't want to put it up there for everyone to see that way. So my advice, my tip with that would be, if you do have them to emails, have them send it, make sure you screen them first and make sure that if you show their example, that you're not putting their name with it unless they're okay with that, right? So I'm going to turn this over to Stephanie now, and Stephanie's going to share with you at the middle high level. So let me clear this. Get all my stuff out of the way.
Okay, I get to become Miss Wanda for a few minutes. So at the middle high level, of course, I'm going to talk to my students about the same things that she's doing, but I'm going to activate that prior knowledge. And for us today, we're going to talk about how to factor trinomials. And guess what? We're going to use the exact same thing that Miss Wanda used for multiplication. So if I'm going to be using those same things, I want to, like I said, activate that prior knowledge. So I want to get them understanding, what are we doing? So one of the things that we may have already done is to do some binomials, and I'll talk to them about, remember when we were doing some multiplication, and we were doing multiplication and we did the rows, and we did rows times the columns, and we put that in there. Well, we're going to do the same thing. The big thing about this is, if the kids need these things like algebra blocks and those kind of things, which they do to start this, you want to make sure that you have these available to the kids, whether you prepackaged them and sent them out. Like I said before, that Wanda said before, that's a really important thing for them to do, is to have these available to them. So if they don't have something, in this case, kind of can't use Cheerios and those kind of things, you can cut these out of foam. And so you can send it out, or you can even cut them out of construction paper. So if you wanted to, you could just make run these off from the internet and send them out, you know, from construction paper, and they can just cut them out at home. So that's a possibility. But I'm going to activate their prior knowledge, and I'm just going to say, hey, do you remember when we did this? And we filled in and we looked at our rows, and I had 3 rows of 2, and I went ahead and done that. And I filled it in, and I said, well, guess what? This works the same way with binomials. And so I'm going to start out with just something very simple. And so they start to see this. Now, also, what else do you notice here? What shape is this forming? Well, there's a reason why we're going to talk about the shape that it's forming, because that's very important for them when they're doing this. So later on, after I've done this and we've talked about this, I'm going to say, okay, our problem that we have is x plus 4 times x plus 2. So we've already talked about x being one of these because it doesn't fit anything else, and we're going to look at that. So I'm going to do the same thing. This is x plus 4. And then what do you think goes at the top? I have somebody answer. They can see that. We can talk about it. Well, if I've got x plus 4 here, I'm going to have across the top x plus 2. And remember, we're going to talk about this more, about yellow is positives and reds are negatives. So at this point, I'm going to say, what happens when I do an x times an x? And hopefully somebody will remember that x times an x is x squared, but I can also talk about, look at the shape that's here and what will fill in with that shape. There's an x squared. Now, an x times 1 is just 1x. And so they can fill that in. Another x times 1 is 1x. And then I've got somebody who's annotating. That's awesome. And then another one is 1x, 1 times x, 1x. And then, of course, this way, it's 1 times x. You're going to start to see that. Fill it in. And 1 times x. And then at the bottom, I've got 1 times 1. I love these because they're so easy for kids to get. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 1 is 1. They love doing that. Sometimes you'll hear them in the background going 1, 1, 1. Till you fill it up. And what shape did I just make? Now, just like Miss Vonda was always making rectangles, guess what? I'm making a rectangle also. Now, great thing about binomials is we have to combine like terms. Well, here I have these like terms, and that is 8. So I'm going to put right here, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's a like term. I'm combining these like terms. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 x's, and I have 1 x squared. And so they can start to see this, which is great. I love the fact that they can see this, they can put them together, they can move them as they need to. But I'm also going to say, now, this is kind of a refresher. So guess what we're going to do today? Now remember, I've activated this prior knowledge. We are going to make sure that today, in our lesson, we're going to be factoring a trinomial. So we're going to be doing the division part of a trinomial. So now, like I said, I've activated that prior knowledge by going all the way back to multiplication, and now we're going to do some division. So we know this shape has to be a rectangle. And at this point, this is still kind of the I do, getting a little bit of the we do by you guys talking to me, somebody's annotating on the screen, those kind of things. But I want them to be able to see each part of this. I'm going to have you build with me. And that's one of the things that you would have them do. I'm going to have you build with me today as we do this. So they've got their little manipulatives there at home. Maybe it's cut out from construction paper or whatever. And today they're going to build with me. So a simple one that we're going to build together today is this one right here. So inside of our wonderful L here, or division, let's put an x squared. Where do you think that x squared goes? Remembering back, where did that x squared go? And where can we put it? You'll have somebody who will say, or eventually up in the corner. And you can say, okay, if you wanted to, they could show you where they put theirs. And then I've got 5x. So let's just do 5x real quick. Now, how am I going to get this plus 4 at the end? So how can I do that? Well, maybe I'm going to put 4 here. Can't put 5 because that would not let me just have 4 little ones right here. And it won't form a rectangle. So what am I doing? What do I need to do with this? And I'm just talking to my students just in the way I normally would. And they're going to, somebody will say, well, maybe we need to move it down here. It needs to go at the bottom because I still need something here. So now I can say, did I form a rectangle? Did you form a rectangle when you were building this? Does your rectangle look similar to mine? Because they may have put their 4 here and their 1 here when they were building their rectangle, and their rectangle may look like this. Guess what? It's kind of the community property that we remember from a long time ago. And so at this point, I'd say, now what is on top? What do I have to have on top to build this? And I'm going to build around that. So at this point, I'd put my x, because that's an x squared. If I have an x there, what do I have to have here? An x. And then, of course, the only thing that's going to fit here to kind of fill in this rectangle is little ones. And the big thing about that is they're positive, because a positive and a positive make a positive and a positive make a positive. Again, positive and a positive make a positive. And the last one. And then I want to say, okay, now let's talk about this. We had this built. What do I know from the factoring? This is x plus 1. This is x plus 4. I come back up here. I can move it up here to x plus 4. I have my answer. So this is just one of the ways that you can have your students, like I said, this can be done out of construction paper. You can use it with the foam ones. You can actually get some foam, just run it off on the foam, cut those out. There's many things that you can do to make this cheap and not have to buy the tiles. But I would definitely recommend, if you're in high school, that you provide your students with a packet that they can either pick up, or you have it shipped to them some way, drop it off at their home, that they can have the manipulatives in hand while you're doing this, because it's going to be so important for them to actually touch it. And I say you're not doing the we do part unless they're touching the manipulatives too. That's the big thing. They have to be touching those manipulatives. So, and then of course the I do would be, I would give them a problem, they would do it. And this is what I had my students do just a couple of weeks ago when we were doing this, was I gave them an I do. I said, okay, now it's your turn. Like I said, I'd taken to our participants all the materials they needed. And I said, now create this and just email it to me, send it to me in chat, however you need to send it to me. I got them back. I quickly referenced those during our lunch and looked at them. And then I had to reteach again because I noticed some people was not understanding what I was asking. Now, was that because somebody may got up, went to the bathroom and come back a little bit later and just didn't understand what I asked? Those things happen. I mean, if our kids are at home and it's virtual, those kind of things will happen. So making sure that we look at the materials and we reteach where it's needed, because that's going to happen. And then also giving them some kind of feedback, saying, you know, I saw this as an example. This was a great one. Look at it. Those kind of things, making sure that they've got that feedback from me at each point in time. So, Ms. Dion, back to you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I probably need to build more background knowledge around binomials before I can actively participate in that lesson, Stephanie, just so I need to brush up on my math. So that was a good example. Thank you. Thank you both for sharing that and talking us through what that would look like in terms of how we would model that. I just thought that's an excellent way to do that. And so Vonda and Stephanie were able to have their participants take a picture and send those models back. You know, that's another way we can think of how we could use that. So Doug says if he'd had this when he was in school, he may have understood the math concept much better. Great activity. So thank you, girls, for that, sharing those tools and resources with us. So we're nearing our end of this session, but I'm going to share with you a couple more things because we are not finished yet. We've only made it through the lesson and how we are able to share with our students an idea of what we're doing with that lesson. So the engagement piece is huge, huge, huge for our students as we think about that virtual lens. Can you all see my screen?
Not yet. It may just be delayed.
Yeah, sometimes we get just a little delay. I'm going to try again.
There you go.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So let me check the chat box as we are moving toward this. And one other, okay, yes. And so Crystal says yes. So we will make these available. I know a couple of people have had that question in there about, can we have these resources? You guys will have the resources. You'll have this video, so you can go back and play it again. You'll have the tools with all the links, and then Cheryl's going to share with you the Google, how to do the poll. So she's going to share that PowerPoint with you. So you'll have all those resources. It's a lot to take in one day, but we want to make it available for you to later go back and read and look through. The next thing I want to talk about just a little bit, and so I have added a tool here on the right around the assessment. So once we get through that piece, and I'm going to just scroll back up just for our talking points, is the I do it. And so we saw those models of how that would look, that thinking out loud, talking through that, understanding that. We saw how we can have students engage in that. We can have them annotate. We can have them hold up a whiteboard. You know, you can do something as simple as A, B, C, D. You know, have a white sheet of paper and have the kids draw a grid. And you write A, B, C, or D. Kids can turn that sheet. They can use a whiteboard, a paddle board. They can use anything. I mean, you can use any tool that you have, that you can think of. You can turn those into a document that you can be using with your class. For instance, right here, I am just going to take a manila folder, and I'm just going to create this as we think about this. You know, I may have just an A, B, C, D. You know, I may have something as simple as A, B, C, D. I might put those, and I show B is my answer. I may say A is my answer. I may say D is my response to this. So the tools that we use for virtual instruction don't have to be, you know, real expensive. They don't have to be things that we have to worry about. You know, if we spill something on them or damage, we can make a whiteboard with a clear sheet, a clear protector sheet, and a piece of cardstock paper. So we are lots and lots of ways that we can use and do manipulatives. The thing that's as important is that we just consider those each time we think about what examples and opportunities we're going to give kids for feedback. So then thinking about the assessment. Now remember, we talked about that. We were talking about looking at that standard. What is it, the standard we're looking at? And then how are we measuring that IEP goal? So are we looking at the assessment? Are we giving them a little quiz at the end of the day? Are we giving them an A, B, C, D, E multiple choice questions? Are we having them model and take pictures of it? When we plan our lesson, we always plan with the end in mind, thinking about what that assessment's going to be. How do we know that students have demonstrated mastery? And so you'll see we have to think through that. What are we doing for that target assessment? What are we looking for that formative assessment for that lesson? And then how are we including that in that summative assessment? And you'll see, and I'm just going to click on it. I'm not going to spend any time talking about it right now, but this is for your use and be able to look at. I'm going to just click on that and take you to the link here. This one is a tool that we have, and it takes just a second for that front page to download. It's a little slower, but this document is redefining the definition of formative assessment. So it takes us back through that conversation about formative assessment. And you may want to go back and say, let me think through formative assessment again, because I'm thinking through a different lens. And so here, this tool, like I said, when you open this, it takes a little while for that front page. It's just a green cover, but you can see these are just thinking about, you know, from how we're planning our instruction, how we're thinking about those tools and resources that we need for a good, solid lesson planning and assessment. And again, for special education processes and for our teachers, we always have to have that in our mind. What progress monitoring, how am I monitoring progress? How am I going to report that? Because that's part of, you know, our expectation and our role of providing services and our evidence for that service was for students. So Dean Paul has shared with us that what, you know, always think about what that measurable verb is back in that goal we were talking about. And then what is your method of measurement? And so he has shared two tools here. I don't know, Dee, if you have anything you want to comment on that, but if you can see that the method of measurement, I'm going to click on that and let you guys look and see what that looks like. Here is a tool. It's a data recording tool. It just helps us think about what is it that we're trying to measure. Remember, we're connecting that back to that IEP goal, that verb. And then, Danny, if you got something you want to say, I'll pause right there.
This is a site that I've used quite a bit. It's the South Bend Community School Corporation site. And what it does is it really breaks down asking you the question, what are you trying to measure? And then what's the appropriate tool to measure it with? And one of the first ones they talk about is a permanent product. They don't include curriculum-based measures here, but we know that those go along with probes. And so, you know, just getting that right and making sure that we understand the tools that we're using to measure. You know, the permanent product is going to be something like a quiz, or when a student produces something that you're going to be able to have tangibly hold of, and you're going to be able to take some data from that. And then as you move through some of these things, can you look at this question, the second one down? Can you easily count every time that the behavior occurs? For example, raising your hand. And if you can count it easily to see that the behavior occurs, then you could use an event recording or a frequency recording. And then one that kind of goes against that or is a little bit different, and sometimes people get confused, down to about the fifth one, I think it is. Do you want to measure how long the behavior lasts? And that would be a duration recording. So it gives you an example. It gives you a little bit of a definition of the tools. And then it also will, down here where you see it says underneath permanent product there, you go down here to the link or the underline, it says permanent product recording sheet. You can click on that and it will bring up a sheet for you to use to collect your data that you can change that easily over to your graph. And you know, you're responsible for doing a graph. And you know, I just want to say this, you got to, whatever behavior you're trying to measure, when you start out and you get your baseline, you place that in the present level, you should keep that same method of measurement for that behavior all the way through in order to be doing your progress monitoring with fidelity and making sure that you're getting sound data to inform your instruction, to improve achievement for students with disabilities. That's very key. And then there's another sheet if you want, and quickly, I know we're running out of time, so I'm going to jump ahead. If you look at this list of measurable verbs, sometimes I review folders and I will see verbs that are used, or if you will, that are not observable. And it's very important that you use observable, measurable verbs. And this is Bloom's taxonomy with a listing of what we would consider cognition at the lower end level, and then all the way up to the higher end levels. You start with knowledge and you work your way through evaluation. And you see those verbs that come under those typical pieces of cognition that you're trying to elicit from your students. And so, this helps to kind of categorize, and all of those things you ask yourself the question, can I see it? Can I hear it? Can I count it? Can I time it? And if I can't, then I'm probably not using the correct verb that's going to be giving us some measurable data that can really inform our progress monitoring. If you slide on down on the bottom of this sheet, there's some more information from Bloom's taxonomy, these action verbs, and it just kind of gives you the definition of what the knowledge, the comprehension, the application, the analysis, synthesis, and evaluation is. And then it arranges those verbs, to use the first one there, it arranges those verbs so that you can see and what the intent of your goal is and how much cognition is being used there. So the more difficult pursuits, of course, would be, synthesizing and evaluating and things of that nature. But I just wanted to include that. I want you to make sure that you're getting those measurable verbs. And you ask yourself, and you look at your IEPs when you go back to your caseloads, and you see if those verbs that you're using are measurable, and you see if the tools that you're using will actually, in fact, measure those verbs. And that's what I have to say about that.
Thank you, Denny. I appreciate that. Again, those tools are going to be there and available for you as we conclude for today. There's one more thing. I just want you to think about every time you deliver that lesson or provide that virtual instruction, or that you're doing those simultaneously. You maybe got some kids at school and some kids at home, and you can use this one with kids in school. If they're on their iPads or their Chromebooks, they can have headphones in and they can be using the same thing with you. So it could be a virtual lesson that you're having some kids in person and some kids from home, so that all kids are part of that. So just be thinking about what went really well for your lesson. How do you need to change that lesson or that delivery in order to improve that? The final thing we're going to ask you guys to do is just put some feedback on this page here for us. Use your annotation tool. And so we're going to ask you to just give us some feedback for today. So we're going to ask you just to annotate here. Maybe make a comment. So use your text. What worked well for you? Well, I can't type. Okay, so what other areas might you need in terms of a session like this? What worked well for you today, and then what might you need for new learning? So it may be that I'm going to annotate that, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to use a text box. So here I'm just going to ask you guys to do that, and you may have more resources. Thanks. So someone has, they like the annotation tool. So just take just a second and just add some feedback for us that we can share and use as we move forward in planning more virtual lesson planning and professional development this way. We're asking for your feedback because you guys have went through this 3-hour session with us. Think about what is it that we all can do, that we all can learn from this, that we want to be able to share with other teachers and other educators. So I'm going to give you 1 minute.
One thing also must be on is as they're annotating or filling out the feedback, also check in the chat, because some folks are putting things in the chat box. Okay. So everyone have an opportunity to go down to the chat box and look in it. And, I've learned quite a bit of things that I need to work on. Plus I need to get better at using chat, paying attention to that, and how to use the tools that are on this platform. So, but.
Okay. Yeah. And if you want to give us some feedback, okay. So here's a good information. Look, not everyone has the option for annotate. That's a very good point. And I'll tell you why. If you're going to use that feature with your class, you want to make sure on the front end that everybody has that feature. If they don't have that feature, you may want to have something else. Either you use that or you find a different way for them to engage in that. So it looks like more, let's see, I'll take mine off there. Okay, so more virtual resources that can be used with MSD students. So that's a great one. So that's an opportunity. So Cheryl is going to be doing some more professional development, more opportunities like this. Our whole thinking is kind of shifted to this kind of practice. So that's good information. We appreciate you guys. We'll get you all, those of you that participated, a certificate that you participated in today. So just expect that in your email. It takes us just a little bit to capture everybody's name and make sure that we got all the participants here. But as we do that, we'll make sure we get those out to you. And you'll receive an email that has this document, and Cheryl will get you all that resource that she had. So you'll have all the links. But we appreciate each of you that hung in there with us today through this training, and good luck. And we want to say that we are part of this learning community. So at any time you want to just send us an email and say, hey, let's practice using this tool. We are happy to do that, because that is how we have learned, and we invite you to join us. If you send us an email and say, I need to practice, we are happy to join you, because we learn, you learn, and it helps all of our students. So that's our whole goal. But if we don't have anything else, thanks to each of you for hanging in there with us, and we'll conclude the session for today. Thank you very much.